Have you ever heard a joke that just didn't sit right with you? Maybe it made you cringe or even feel a little hurt. We've all been there, but have you ever stopped to think about why we've moved away from so-called offensive humor? It's not about being too sensitive. It's a fascinating story of social evolution. Let's take a trip back in time. For centuries, humor was often a tool of the powerful. Jokes frequently punched down, targeting marginalized groups based on their race, gender, nationality, or abilities. Think about the court jesters of the medieval period. While they could sometimes speak truth to power, their humor often relied on mocking those with less social standing. This kind of humor reinforced the existing social hierarchy. It sent a clear message. Some people are normal and others are laughable. This wasn't just harmless fun, it was a way of maintaining the status quo and dehumanizing entire groups of people. As we moved into the 20th century, mass media like radio and early television brought this type of humor into everyone's homes. Many popular shows and comedians built their careers on stereotypes. At the time, this was widely accepted because the voices of those being targeted were rarely heard in the mainstream. The people writing the jokes, producing the shows, and running the networks were overwhelmingly from the dominant culture. And they were creating content that they found funny, often at the expense of others. But then, something started to change. The post-war era brought massive social shifts. The civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and disability rights advocacy began to gain momentum. For the first time on a large scale, people who had been the butt of jokes for generations started to speak up and say, "Hey, that's not funny. That's hurtful, and it has real-world consequences." They explained how these harmless jokes contributed to discrimination, prejudice, and a culture where they weren't seen as fully human. This was a major turning point. Society began to develop a greater sense of empathy and a deeper understanding of the power of words. We started to realize that humor doesn't exist in a vacuum. A joke that relies on a negative stereotype isn't just a joke. It's a tiny little building block that helps construct a wall of prejudice. When you hear those jokes over and over, they can subtly influence your perception of a whole group of people, even if you don't consciously realize it. Then came the internet and social media. This was the real game changer. Suddenly, everyone had a platform. The monologue of old media became a global conversation. If a comedian told an offensive joke on a major network, it wasn't just a few people writing letters of complaint anymore. Now, millions of people could instantly share their reactions online. People could share their personal stories about how those very stereotypes had negatively impacted their lives, their careers, and their mental health. This created a new level of accountability. The "it's just a joke" defense started to crumble because the harm was no longer invisible. Today, we understand that great comedy doesn't need a victim. The most clever, witty, and hilarious jokes are the ones that are inclusive. They punch up at systems of power. They find humor in the absurdity of everyday life, or they connect us through shared human experiences. It's not about censorship, it's about creativity. It's about being smart enough and empathetic enough to make people laugh without making someone else feel small. So, the next time you hear someone complain about comedy being too politically correct, remember this journey. The shift away from offensive humor isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of social progress. It's the result of a long and hard-fought battle for respect and dignity. It's a reflection of a society that is trying, little by little, to become more compassionate and inclusive for everyone. And that's something worth celebrating, not mocking. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more content. See you in the next one.